The little shyness that I had at Asmara University, I'll break it. Don't worry. It happens. So we all have beneficiaries of science and technology. One of them is our phone. And media is using that. But how do we know that media produced information could leverage science and technology resources at the same time, support the advancement of science and technology for Eritrean growth? That was a motivation for me. So I'm going to put about just a high-level relationship of governing body, media, and how is that the historical relevance to science and technology or human resource development. The Eritrean media platform, especially since 2000, they were very active, but were they reactive to what the government brings an agenda, or did they create a lot of proactive programs as well? But what's the next roadmap on how do we leverage science and technology, mainly from the ownership or driving the media itself or the media communication industry to integrate with it? I always use this verse. It says, open your mouths, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy. It's really a cornerstone for me for using this verse, because if we don't open our mouths, who's going to open the mouths, for those who are suffering? A brief intro, and I will focus mainly on the science and academic relationship. We know in Eritrea, especially since Eritrea became independent, media is a mouthpiece of the government, and it's powerful. And if you think about the Ministry of Information, all the documentations that they have, a lot of the resources that were collected in the 70s and 80s, it's a public resource. And the Ministry of Information itself, as an institution, is a byproduct of every Eritrean who were contributing the struggle. But it became an asset to just serve only one way for the government. And one of the things that this has done is it built a big military industry and devalued education, institution, and scholars. In Eritrea, the whole society in general, if you're a scholar versus a military leader or an army general, who gets more the respect? It's the armies. Who's more resourceful? It's the armies. Do you want to send your kids to go to school, succeed academically, or do you want to send them to the army? No one wants to the army, but the image has been reversed. And that's partly because the media played on that. Historically, I have some historical timetable that shows a little bit how the government used the media to devalue the institutional-based academic programs, at the same time the scholars that the institutions produced. Now, with the rapidly growing digital media, now how could the media or the industry as such, especially in the free world where we are, reverse this social reengineering? How do we reverse that? And how could we create, through this rapidly advancing medias, a value-added or knowledge-based, like how Dan was talking about, to generate an information? There's a lot of resources invested, but with digital media, I could open a YouTube and speak without verifying the information that's generated. In diagram-wise, what I'm trying to say is if you have a sustainable system, there's a governing body that has all organizations in it. Media and communication is a platform that will transfer knowledge or information from the government bodies to the public or vice versa in a healthy environment. And there's also this knowledge-based institutions and scholars that could support that system. This is sustainable. Is that what we have in Eritrea? I'm quite sure, you know, a lot of the scholars of Eritreans who were making tremendous efforts in the 80s supporting the Eritrean struggle, such as Rice, a lot of those institutions, that's what they were after. Am I right? Everybody was after that, and we were very hopeful. Myself, I started Asmara University in 91. I finished 96. We were very ambitious of this environment, to be part of the sustainable system. I don't think that's where we are right now. I think what happened is there's a big military industry that sucks the high school and the university system. It's well integrated with the media. I don't think there's any independent institution or truly knowledge-based institutions that could work within the functional system of the government. Now, if it's not sustainable right now, if we assume that, what's our role to reverse it? Or what's the media role in particular, which is more powerful nowadays than, you know, many institutions? I want to give a little perspective. I'll go through this one quickly. Rissam and Emnetu from Sweden, we're trying to write, you know, draft articles, you know, with this educational perspective. It gives us the opportunity to go back. I'm going to stay on the colonial years. How did government try to create programs on education institutions? How does that affect Eritreans? Well, as we all know, during the Italian colonization, you know, the policies were mainly on militarization, creating institutions for Italians. I didn't know that the Italian government in 1926 created a center, Liceo Classico. I don't know the true translation of that into English, except the Classico means the best. So that was kind of I would say, a founding base for what became Asmara University. It was originally intended to support the Italians who were in Eritrea. But they limit education to the locals. And a good testimony would be if you read the book by Al-Azhar. I met him, I think, in 2001 before he passed away. It was really a great opportunity to just listen to him. So he was one of them, because there were a few evangelical mission schools in Eritrea, in Tzazagab, Balaza, and Asmara. According to his book, he said there were about 500 students boarding and non-boarding. There's other statistics that show the numbers were higher than that. So what did the Italian government did? Limit the Eritreans to grade 4. And they closed the evangelical mission schools because the Italian government were afraid of them. They could oppose the Italian government if they pursue their education. What was the byproduct? Well, a lot of young Eritreans at that time, they didn't have freedom. They lacked education. They migrated to Ethiopia. And one of them was Al-Azhar. He was in his early 10s, maybe. If you read his book, it gives you the same narrative that a lot of our youth are going through. In his time, he said many of the students had to leave Eritrea to pursue education. One route was to go through Tigray. But that was a more riskier, that was a risk. It had a lot of risk on that because the Italian police would stop them and arrest them. So he took his journey to Massawa, and then the journey is very longer than I can describe here. But the point what I'm saying is the government had brought technologies, which is a printing press. As you may know, that was the technology of the day, created institution for the Italians, but the Eritreans were not beneficiaries of that. And they ran away to pursue education and freedom. I think for me, I'm one of them in the 2000 or 1990, 2000. When I left Eritrea, I could not go because I go to church on the Pentecostal churches. If I go, I know what's my fit, right? And I want to pursue education in the United States, prior to that in Europe. Similar thing. Well, the 40s and 50s, that's another great time in terms of press. I would call it one of the renaissance in literature and press, which created a lot of opportunity for Eritrean scholars, either went to Ethiopia or stayed in the religious institutions, were able to write, read, publish a lot of books. In the 50s to 70s was also another great 2 decades. But if you look at the top, every year, every blocks of those decades, governments create policies or institutions. The Eritreans have to respond to it in a different way. But if you look at those about 30, 40 years, I think that's a time where we had a lot of Eritreans who finished high school, went to college, universities in Ethiopia. The statistics is also very, very interesting. But when Haile Selassie came, some of their negative policies, where they were a lot of programs that that did not let Tigrinya literature go through it. They want to change it to Amharic, right? So there's a lot of details on this that I could still need to do more study myself. But I think the one thing is, if you look at the Ethiopian high schools, all in Ethiopia, 27 of them were in Eritrea. Okay? So what that means is education, institutions, literatures, and writing were really growing faster than I can imagine. How about when Derg, which is the 70s to 80s, if we look at the policies, the Ethiopianization continued. And then a new program came, or new policies, which is what ELF and EPLF has done. Of course, in the Eritrean context, what we're looking at is mainly about loyalty. If I'm ELF or EPLF, you get stuck with it till the end of your life, which really is, I don't know how it came, but I think it's an orchestrated, designed policies by those organizations somehow. Well, how about the Eritreans? That's when a lot of those Eritreans who finished their college degrees or high school in the 70s, they had to leave, continue their education, in the Western world. A lot of them continued, postgraduate studies. They were able to do advocacy programs for Eritrea. The free world, which, if I may call it the Western world, allowed them to create a new platform. For example, RISE, the Research Institute Center for Eritrea, I think ERA, there were different organizations that came up because this new critical mass of Eritrean scholars with their friends who are non-Eritreans were able to continue the leverage of that what they had started in the 70s for their educational program. At the same time, because of the Ethiopian policy, especially those who were in Eritrea, they were arrested. There was a lot of atrocities on scholars. One of them is Dr. Petros Habtemikael. What happened is he was a professor at University of Asmara. He used to teach economics. I think if you know him or if you heard about him, you could help me add more news. But the main thing is that because he had a bachelor degree, a master's degree, a PhD in economics from Switzerland and France. So he went back to Eritrea to teach at the university. When he was a professor, he used to argue Eritrea could self-sufficiently become an independent where its economy can sustain the Eritrean nation, because that was contrary to the typical Ethiopian narrative. But he was arguing about this stuff at the university, at that time, University of Asmara. He also would teach to the students that Amharic, Tigrinya, or Tigray, which comes first, right? It was purely a freedom of inquiry, an institution that would open, a discussion like that. But the Ethiopian cadres, who were some of them were students, were against this, and he was killed. Okay, but he was defending what? Freedom of inquiry, human rights, and about the Eritrean cause. So how many years has passed between Al-Azhar and Dr. Petros? Quite a lot. But they were kind of struggling the same thing. Freedom, education at that time, Eritrea right to exist. So this phenomenon, to me, has appeared in a different way after post-independent Eritrea. I don't have time to go through from 90s to up to now. Maybe if opportunity comes, we'll present that or prepare it in another way. But a few of the statistics that support some of this educational programs, especially this, the 60s and 70s. This is from a book written by Taye. It's Ethiopian, and Rutsam has archived a lot about the history of education. So if you look at this, in 1968, ESLCE is a Ethiopian School Living Certificate Examination. About 18% of the total admitted or passed that exam were Eritreans, from Eritrea. Well, about 66% were from Addis Ababa. Well, does that include the Eritreans who were also in Addis Ababa? Most likely, yes, right? So if you look at the statistics of that, so that's how education and knowledge were produced by the institutions in Ethiopia or Eritrea at that time. How about high schools? So I put this top 4. Okay, I did not do the whole Ethiopia, just because they're the major producing regions of Ethiopia at that time. So if you look at the high schools, Asmara had about 55% high school. To me, this is mind-boggling. Where's our high schools now? Where's the high school? Where is it? It's Sawa. Is Sawa under the military industry? The answer is yes. How about University of Asmara or Asmara University? The institution is part of the military. I asked, the younger graduates from my nephew and alike, the smaller institutions, they told me that you wake up in the morning, they have to do military training. I think the school director was from Sawa. So what happened? So if this is what we were ambitioning for, what the 70s and the 80s were struggling for academically, did we deliver as a society? I don't think we have delivered. Who do we blame? I disagree if we say, like, let's blame Isaias. To me, let's first blame ourselves, so we will find solution for it. Yeah, I think the statistics, they tell you different. So in what you see in 1968 is students who finish high school, they take their exam, and that statistics is for students admitted or passed the exam to go to mainly the Addis Ababa University. This one is the 70s, is about a full decade, about number of high schools. It's not students. It's just, how many high schools were there. So the statistics is different, yeah. Well, how does media comes into this? I don't know, but I'll try my best. So I know that digital media is a rapidly growing industry. It's become an industry. Alton Musk bought Twitter. The richest man in the world bought social media. That's how influencing it is. And it does influence a lot of the factors, social, economical, and cultural. But I'm worried about the relationship that social media might have with the traditional scientific-based generation of information, analysis of information, and products to be delivered. Because as we know, in science, most of scientific studies, they work based on falsification of a hypothesis with acceptable level of probability. If somebody does collect data, you try to falsify the null hypothesis. Oh, they're the same or not. And you give some level of degree of probability of accepting your error. Does social media follow this traditional path? Does it have to follow? Maybe it's not necessary. But if information is generated, delivered, the person who perceive it or accept it is going to make a decision out of it. If it's through the scientific journals, you have to read it. You probably it's not accessible to the public. Now, but whether we like it or not, it affects this cycle of knowledge generation, analysis, and delivery positively or negatively, both ways. Some of the typical platforms are Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Another thing is this institutional-based knowledge system versus non-professional individual opinions. If I turn on YouTube, I start, lecturing about, for example, agriculture. I love, I love technology and how it's making impact in food production. If I say a lot of things, that's my personal opinion. But if I want to say about a pure scientific study, I have to do 4 or 5 years of study and deliver it. So how do we balance that is the point. Now, how is it related to Eritrean or the Eritrean case to me is, do you think that science and technology drives the media, or is it the media drives the science and technology? Media, well, how about if we didn't have this iPhones, would you have a digital media? Probably not. They're both. It's both ways. Thank you. for positive voice. Yeah, that's my point. So I think for me, when we think about Eritrean, because we struggle now, right? To me, our struggle to some extent is, if I'm growing professionally, do I need to interact with the general public of the Eritrean community? Your heart says yes, because for me, the academic institutions that we went through as my university, it's the people who give us. So we have to give. But Eritrean society in general, the general public, it gives you a name, right? Like what the previous speaker was saying. So how strong are you to defend that? Or if you are in an academic, this traditional path, you just want to hide maybe, right? I don't know. So media influences science and technology, but we need to institutionalize it somehow for a positive purpose. Positive purpose. Well, I'm going to go a little faster here, but I think for me, I came to the United States in 2000. It was January 3rd, cold in Madison, Wisconsin. I don't know what I do, but I enjoyed the high. I enjoyed East Afro. I go to the library, listen to the discussions. Very healthy, nice. A lot of them good. Well, there was something that put the Eritrean at that time into a big magnet, and that was a war. We thought that we were right? We thought that as a united, we have to unite. And I really cherish also a lot of the technical writings or presses that were coming from professionals at that time. But where's the high now? 5 minutes, thank you. If you don't stop me, I'll continue. Where's the high? It disappeared. What come after that? Asmarino, Awate, a lot of them, right? So they're really great. I love it. Creating a lot of platforms. But a lot of them, in my opinion, I think Don was also saying somewhat along that line. I think they should stop, all of us should stop about disseminating or creating programs as a reaction to what the government generates. Because in other words, we're giving him a feedback. Our opinions, they could leverage it. We should hit the root cause of it or create a new pass line. How do you do that? I think a lot of these platforms should have a collaborative effort, and that could help also the longevity of the system. I'm not saying one organization or one media, but the objectives, the missions of the media and also the digital one. This is my last slide, if I'm still in the 5 minutes. But what's a new prospect? I don't know. But I want to propose. My proposal is, I think if we want to impact positively, especially in the new Eritrea, it's good to go back to the fundamentals about knowledge-based institutions. Now, what do they need to support, or what should be the building blocks? It's open for discussion. I'm just throwing this. We could focus on health, education, economic, and allowing marketplace through the different social media environments. The top two, I said connectivity and mobility and safety and security. Those are new that are coming to my mind. Maybe this is a good platform to get debate. And the reason I added those was when Ethiopia made the change in the 18, right after that, I think there's a lot of misconception about each ethnic city, each ethnicity. One is judging the other without knowing who they are. So lack of connectivity. And if people move from point A to point B, either digitally or physically, you get to know about the people better, right? Connectivity and mobility might be one of the areas that we need to pursue, in my opinion, to avoid or minimize the potential post if I may call it, if Eritrea comes into a right path, a right change, I think we're going to have a lot of issues about safety and security. If the current government change it, will you be safe? I don't know, right? Yeah, so in other words, to me, those connectivity and mobility, safety and security should have a lot of weight as to how would the new prospect or digital media has a power, remember, right? Yeah. So look at how, I'm talking about just in a broader narrative, how the Tigray or Amhara are viewing each other. Are we going to go through that? I don't know. In our own Eritrean context. I think the rest is easy. Now, what I'm saying is, what should be the role of digital media in addressing some of this, either this ones or new ones? It's open for discussion. I think this might be a good time to stop. But the point is, what should digital media do? What should Erisat, Senna, all of them do? To me, there has to be some common vision, common goal. That value may be, some of it could be create a common added visions and ethically, did I say ethically? Yeah, ethically sound. They could also try to interact or give opportunities for academic or non-academic institutions. The first one, I think that's a hanging fruit in my opinion. We don't have any management archiving, archiving system. So we've been here the last 20 years and Eritrea has not gone through properly the last 30 years. If our generation or coming, 30 years from now, if they want to see, what was going on, we don't have that. I'm so grateful that, the institutions that were working in the 80s, such as RICE and others, they generated books, resources that we could go and read them. What would digital media role would be in that aspect? Sorry for being, keeping the discussion longer. I get heated out. I told you I may be a little shy, but when I'm after a few minutes, I get better. Thank you. Yeah. Any questions? I'll be very glad to try to answer them. I'm quite sure, I may not have the essay because media or journalism is not my area. But I love connecting through this platform.
سلبسي أي تفرحي نحق فرح نزجف